Hi, I'm Dan McFadyen, Managing Director of Edalex, and it's my great pleasure to be joined today by Ryan O'Hare. Ryan is the founder and CEO of Keypath Education Australia and Asia Pacific. As such, Ryan leads one of the region's fastest growing education businesses and the largest online program management business in Asia Pac, focused solely on the postgraduate education sector. With over 20 years' experience at the forefront of higher education across the UK, North America, Australia, and Asia Pacific, Ryan has a history of launching and scaling online education businesses. Established in 2014, Ryan has grown the Keypath Australia and Asia Pac team from his kitchen to over 300 full-time employees across Australia and Asia, and built multi-year partnerships with many universities across the region. In a previous life, Ryan and I worked together for a number of years, which was a great pleasure, and it's a great pleasure having you back again, Ryan.
Thanks, Dan. Good to see you. We used to spend time face to face together sorting problems, but now we're virtual, so I guess that's the way the world works. But yeah, delighted to be here. Thanks for the invite and looking forward to the conversation.
Right. Thanks so much. Well, look, to set the stage, can you tell us about Keypath? What is it that the company does, and what do you see as the key to your success?
Thanks. So we are in education vernacular, we're called an OPM, which is an online program management business. We don't really love that title or that tagline, and I think I've mentioned this before, but no OPM companies love to be referenced as one. So I'll try and do a better job of explaining what we do than referencing us as an OPM. We started in 2014, as you alluded to, which is frightening because we still try to sell ourselves as a startup, especially when we're trying to recruit people. We used to say, "Oh, we're a startup, but we've got money, so you don't have to, come in and clean the toilets at the end of the day."
The best of both worlds, yes.
Exactly, yeah. That was our sort of fail-safe way of trying to entice people to come into the company. But for the last, what is it now, coming up on 9 years now, we've worked with leading universities across this country, a bit like you guys, in helping them understand the non-traditional student and the online education world, which was growing pretty nicely for years, and due to the emergence of tech and the growth of the non-traditional student and the sort of slowing down of the international student market and universities needing to find alternative ways to find students, and businesses like us coming in and helping with that. And then obviously COVID happened and it accelerated in a huge step change. So nowadays, as kind of you and everyone knows, online education is part of the main delivery. It's part of the mainstay in higher education, and it's kind of here to stay forever. But yeah, I circle back to 9 years ago, and even prior to that, when you and I worked together, Dan, and we were having to, have very strange conversations with people about what online education and what it wasn't, and why students wouldn't necessarily cheat as they, if you couldn't see them in front of your eyes, despite the fact that they were cheating in your lecture theater too. So we started the business with the view to help universities and large scale universities understand the audience and the market and the need for diversification. And then we worked with them to do a lot of the stuff that's sort of core to us, but probably not core to the institutions, which is marketing and recruitment and student growth and online pedagogy and instructional design and data and insights and market awareness. And we allowed them to be great at the sort of content and delivery and subject matter expertise and accreditation and qualification. So together it made this really interesting partnership. And that sounds great now, but 9 years ago, we were like most businesses and most startups in any market, but especially in Australia, it was a lot of door knocking and a lot of no's and a lot of failed attempts to try and build a business. So, we work now with 10 universities in Australia. We manage close to 100 degree programs when you sort of stack them all up in anything and everything, from engineering to health, social work and psychology and counseling, and business and IT and law and Juris Doctors and project management. And I could go on forever, creative writing, whatever. There's almost a degree in everything because there's a market for everything. But 8 years ago, a little over 8 years ago, we launched an online MBA with Southern Cross University, and that was it. That was all we had. We had about 10 people and a couple of marketers and a few student recruitment people. And
Wow.
we put an online MBA into the market, and we told them we would get them, a few students, and we would create a nice degree. And we launched it, and within our first year, we had over 300 students in the program, and that completely dwarfed everyone's expectation. And we took off from there and off and running. But it's been a pretty fast ride. And we've been quite fortunate along the way, but we now get the really great opportunity to try and make a difference in this sector, and with a lot of great university partners.
Wonderful, and in a competitive environment, that's huge success. So kudos to you and your team, Ryan. You mentioned the pandemic. It obviously comes up in quite a few discussions, and that's caused some very tumultuous several years for the education industry globally, but certainly, and I'd say especially here in Australia. Given your experience here in the Asia-Pac region and really experience around the globe, what do you think universities are getting right today? And then where do they need to improve, adapt, stop, change what they're doing?
Yeah, great question. I mean, obviously, no sectors, no industries were prepared for a pandemic, and not the least higher education. So it's easy in hindsight to say you weren't prepared, but no one. We weren't prepared as a business. I remember having to the week after ScoMo shut the country down, sign an enormous invoice for laptops so that we could send all our staff to work from home. Everyone was on desktops in an office, and I had to spend an absolute fortune on laptops so that we could keep everyone working from home. And you'll remember this with you. Well, how long will they be there? And would they come back in the office in a few weeks' time? So no one was prepared for it. I will say, as it pertains to us in the online education world, no one, very, very few universities had any form of plan for online education at scale. I've used this example before, but the sort of bellwether for coming together as a sector is the trip to Canberra once a year, when you go and do the higher education, the Australian Higher Education Conference. And I've mentioned this before, but for the 3 years prior to COVID, there wasn't a single session or discussion on online education on the agenda for 3 years prior.
Wow.
Now, they talk about a lot at that conference, and we're all there, but no one was talking about it, and no one was prepared for it. So we got the outcomes we got as a result of it. So I think the things that higher education has done well, and I see universities doing really well in this, and I think even prior to COVID, this was happening, and I'd be curious to hear your take on this. I think there's been a mentality change towards looking outside of the confined sandstone walls. Whether that comes to partnerships, and I think Australia's history in international education has got a lot to do with that too. We're a bit more open and receptive. There were a lot of new innovative partnerships happening. You look at things like Swinburne Online really set stuff in motion. Things like Moodle and other things being created here. There's a sort of environment that's somewhat embracing of the external, I think, in Australia. And I certainly saw, and I'm curious to hear your take, I certainly saw over the years that was becoming more and more open, and it was becoming easier and more accessible for universities to think outside of doing everything themselves. So, and COVID has accelerated that. They needed partnerships, and they needed external support and experts to be able to help upskill quickly and bring in competence. So I think the mentality change has really helped in that, the competitive environment for universities aren't other universities. They are anyone and everyone these days that can, help and support and upskill people. And I'm sure we're going to talk about the sort of skills growth at some point in time. And then I think the other is this sort of need for the improvement on the student experience and the consumer expectation side is certainly getting better. I don't think it's unfair to say that higher education lags a lot of industries in terms of its quality of user experience and its alignment to what happens in, whether it's retail or travel or online banking or Netflix or whatever you want to use. So I think we're getting slowly better at that, and again, that's a result of more public-private partnerships. So I think maybe I may say this because I'm on the outside and it's easy to look at it that way, but it's a lot easier to do business with universities than maybe it was 10, 15 years ago. And I think the mentality shift has happened. I still think there's a long way to go. And I, most of the universities we have the fortune to work with would acknowledge such. I'm still amazed in 2023 that we are now that a lot of universities don't have a digital strategy. And there's a building strategy, and there's a IT strategy,
right?
There's a teaching and learning strategy, and there's an infrastructure strategy. And the biggest disruptive force over the last 10, 15 years and going forward is, digital and technology and the fast emergence of it. And really, for the most part, universities don't have a combined structured digital strategy, which amazes us, and I'm sure be similar to you when you walk in and try, well, where will we fit in with that, and what are the measurements of success, and how are we going to sit alongside the other initiatives you're trying to do, and where are you trying to get to by 25, 30? And it's hard then to be successful because you're sort of a subcomponent of something that'll maybe join up with something else at some point in time. So I truly think that's an enormous piece of work that a lot of education executives are going to have to work on as well. What is our institution's digital strategy, and how are we going to stay as fast or as close as we can to keeping a pace with it? And then on a probably more micro level, I think the measurements of success in higher education are changing and need to. I was on a panel the other day where we were talking about retention, a topic close to my heart, and there was a perspective, rightly, that online retention and attrition in online education can be markedly different or worse than in face-to-face education, which in a lot of cases is correct. But it isn't an apple to an apple, and the measurement of success for the student is the viewpoint through which we should be looking at it, as opposed to what text guides us to do. The argument that is someone better off doing a 4-year bachelor's of IT or a 2-3-year master's of IT, or are they better off taking some courses in cyber and risk or IoT and moving to the data science or moving to the next? Surely the user gets to sort of decide what level and volume of skills they need in order to move and progress within their life, depending upon their age, of course. But I think we need to adapt a lot more to less the sort of internal and insular views of what success and completion and retention and graduation and other things look like, and more towards, well, what do we need in order to be able to feel comfortable that there's progression in skills and expertise, but also that that's what the user needs and wants, and that's sufficient, and that if they've got that inside 3.5 months and they've progressed on with their life, are they a failure, and are they a failed statistic? So that I think there's a lot in there, and there's a whole Pandora's box around that, especially when it comes to lifelong learning and evaluation of skills. But I just summarize it by saying I really think we've progressed a lot in understanding that higher education doesn't start and stop when you're 18 to 22. That sort of front ending of education, that there is a perspective that we need to be much more tied towards lifelong learning, however that user wants to get it.
Wonderful. Wow. There's so much in there to unpack.
It's a really long answer, Dan.
Well, I think it was a yes/no question, Ryan. So yeah.
I failed.
No.
There you go. The measurement of success was wrong.
Yeah. So just building on a couple of those points, I think one of I would agree with so much of what you said, and that COVID really broke down a lot of barriers, and the old excuses of no, we can't do it that way, no, we can't do it online, no, we can't change. Well, there was no choice. So just as you said, you had to buy laptops, and everyone had to work at home that week. And I'm talking to a number of institutions and organizations that within 2 weeks they didn't have an online program or a full-fledged online program. They had to spin one up in a matter of weeks. How do you do that? But I think it's also helped remove barriers for the learners, right? So again, not necessarily do they have to follow the same path. that an institution or previous generations.
Completely. And don't get me wrong, Dan, I have no problem with all of us being unprepared for a pandemic and having to do what we needed to do, right? I mean, it's if you have to stand outside Woolworths at 7 a.m. to make sure you get toilet roll, then the comparison to building a course on the fly for students anywhere and everywhere quickly and not doing it brilliantly is not far off. However, I love a line I heard recently, which was that no one learning to swim in a flood is going to win gold at the Olympics. So it's fine to be unprepared, but what have we learned out of it? And how does that then inform the fact that, you know, there is a need for a coherent digital strategy across all institutions? We've moved towards, we already had less and less people coming to campus and wanting learning in different forms, modalities and areas. There is no way we're ever reverting back to whatever normal was. So how do we embrace the fact that change has absolutely happened and that, you know, a digital life is going to impact universities forever? So we've got to embrace that. And I think that's and I say we in the royal way, it's our responsibility, it's your responsibility, it's, you know, it's corporate's responsibility, it's professionals' responsibility, it's university's responsibility. We're all in figuring this out together.
Perfect. I want to pull on one of the threads you mentioned around skills. So that's the word skills, and the concept is on everyone's minds these days, and deservedly so. So there's increasing spotlight on the imperative to develop skills in learners, and that those skills need to be workplace relevant. They need to be delivered with greater clarity and focus, and delivered at the speed that industry requires. And this, we're certainly seeing this being driven both by learners, newly liberated learners perhaps, but by learners as well as industry and the global skills shortage that's really impacting every company around the world. And from my experience, the concept of skills at some institutions used to be looked down about. That was a dirty word. That might have been for the vocational sector. We don't do skills, but certainly recently we're finding our clients.
Don't say competency either, Dan. Don't say.
Well, I know you can say mastery, but never competency, right? So different vocabulary, and yet still the same learners. So so we're really seeing that our clients are getting on board and really looking to make that shift from course-centric to skill-centric learning. I'd love to get your thoughts on the broader perspective, broader education industry. Are they ready? What do you think they need to do to make that transition?
Yeah, fascinating topic, Dan. I think
and this is another yes/no question. So just no. Please.
Yes, we need to be all better skilled. No, we don't have capacity to do it all. Is that sufficient? So we, and just to give some perspective, so we are traditionally a business that's focused on qualifications, accreditation, degrees. So we manage across our portfolio. The vast majority of our portfolio is in postgraduate qualifications, from sort of stackable certificates right the way up to masters, in anything and everything. So we have been less focused on, I guess, what people might assume skills-based learning is, which is shorter, unaccredited, micro-based components. That said, we manage tens of thousands of students in anything and everything, and the vast majority of those students aren't there to complete a 2 to 3 year master's degree. They are there to get the component of skills within the qualification that they need. That's been fascinating to us over the years, which is that, and some of that is sort of labor driven. If 4 months worth of cybersecurity learning is enough to get me, increase in salary and a job, do I need to complete this because we have such skill shortages? But others are because I think it's a reflection of, once people get beyond that undergraduate, maybe their desire, their need, their will to be able to sort of persist through one form of learning for 2 to 3 years is certainly less. We would have more students now in some of our, we have more students now who would complete multiple graduate certificates in various things than do one master's degree. which is
Okay.
quite amazing. So we would have a student that might do a graduate certificate in HR, one in analytics, and then something else in management before they would do, 1-2 year master's program, which is fascinating. So the disaggregation of the traditional qualification into, call it whatever you like, skills-based learning or micro learning or sort of sub-qualifications has been happening already. And like most things, it's driven by the user before the market catches up and creates a sort of terminology for it, battling around micro-credentials, which you can't say these days without saying the word framework after it. I've learned. But the market's been doing it for ages. We're just a little bit late to trying to figure out that it's happened and that we need to put some sort of parameters around it and some sort of name and terminology and structure to it.
And I think you made a really important point around, from a statistics perspective, the fact that someone didn't complete or go for that full degree, they're not a failure, right?
Correct.
If they've acquired the skills and knowledge and abilities that they're after, then that's a perfect success for them.
Correct. The vast majority of our students don't live in metro areas. They live in regional, rural areas all across Australia. And one of their reasons for studying online is obviously physical disparity to a campus. But another is the sort of anxiety and nervousness that exists, especially around, 50% of our students are female. There can be an apprehension for working mothers going back into higher education that the sort of remoteness is a benefit to them, and that then the sort of that feeds into how they then learn and the sort of anxiety that comes with that. And to get back into education is a huge step, especially if you've been out for 15, 20 years. There's all forms of nervousness and anxiety that come with it. And getting yourself back into a sort of way of learning through an academic qualification is tough. And that's a lot of what we have to do, is supporting students in rural areas with the path that they then need to get to that qualification. So if that working mom in regional part of Victoria or Western Australia persists for 4 to 6 months to get some form of qualification or learning in an area that they may not have done for 15, 20 years, then in no way is that a failure to us. And it shouldn't be in any way, but it might be a statistical failure in terms of a sort of dropout or a lack of full qualification completion. But it's a fantastic success story. So anyway, back to your point around skills. I think, look, it's certainly happening, and I'm sure you spent most of the last couple of weeks typing things into ChatGPT just to see how unclever you are. My
undergraduate dissertation.
I know. Where were we? Yeah. I think things like that are wonderful, right? And in 6 months' time, there'll be the next version of that, and we'll move on. Is it going to replace the university in the next 5 years? No, it's not. There's going to be it's like all these things. There'll be a great use for it, and it'll complement and it'll add. But I do think it's just another brick in the wall towards the various ways through which we can acquire knowledge and learning, away from maybe the traditional way that you and I, went to a university. And as the only offering that we could have got maybe 15, 20 years ago, I think if I, told my parents 20 years ago, well, actually, I'm just, the computer's going to teach me how to be and there's this thing, if I type it in, it'll tell me really quickly. My dad would have thrown something at me. But we have to understand that, I love the line that the future doesn't really care how you become an expert. And I look at that right now with the long list of people we have to hire, and do I really care where my front-end devs learn to be really good front-end devs? Yeah. Do they need to have, 4 years worth of sort of software engineering behind them at a university to be able to be competent in the workplace? Probably not. But then at the same time, we sit at we fully believe in the value of a university qualification, not just because of the skills you can learn, but also the non transferable information, the human-centered skills that you get alongside it. And when we go to work with large corporates and professionals, which we do all the time, the same feedback comes through again and again and again, which is that, yeah, there are any amount of skilled professionals we can find, but none of them can solve a problem, work in a team, communicate, think critically. The general things that a great university experience add to and supplement as well. So there will be areas where things will be replaced. I think that's an absolute. But I think there's probably greater propensity for opportunity and complementary opportunities for the sector where we can embrace, the change and the diversity that's happening in technology, but it can add and supplement to the great experience that we can get through formal and informal qualifications out of university. And I think we're more excited about that than anything. And certainly that's a lot of what I know you're focused on is the acknowledgement and recognition that skills are in many capacities, right? Skills are communication and critical thinking just as much as they are software engineering.
Well, that's right. And a grade doesn't tell you, as you said, all those 21st century skills, human skills, durable, call them what you will, which are so important. So yeah, that's one of our core focuses around that surfacing of skills, which which ties into what you've said about the variety of options that learners have, and that the degree itself is no longer the signal to hire that it once was. So what does that mean for universities who have geared their themselves, their structure, their programs, their offerings around this assumption that there are these monolithic, stackable at some level, but these very large degrees, and that's good enough?
Yeah, look, it's been happening, and most analysts and most people that assess data at a university, whether they're in finance or insights or marketing, will be able to tell you that they've seen sort of changes happening over time. I think the greatest disruption will come outside of the traditional undergraduate area. I think that's still relatively safe for a period of time. And I would hope so. I think there's just so much that sort of 18 to 22-year-olds can get from being at a university and traveling and learning and embracing that sets them up for life. I think the great disruption will happen beyond that in the lifelong learning area, that this acknowledgement that a degree is the only passport to skills and employment, if you want to work in certain professional areas, is somewhat flawed. I will caveat that by saying, like everyone, right, I want my doctor to have got more than a LinkedIn badge. I want my physiotherapist to have done more than an app. Yeah. But I think that's straightforward. I think even in those areas, and this is a lot of work we're doing around the embracing of technology to support clinical healthcare skills can help. There's still obviously an extreme acknowledgement that we want people to be able to operate in a physical hospital or private healthcare center as well. But coming back to it, yes, the need for a diversity of offering to a really diverse audience is critical, and that's, I think, the bit that we've probably lost as a sector is this bundling of everyone non-undergraduate into one thing. Well, they're a postgraduate and they're one audience, and they want an MBA, and here's how we'll get it to them, and they want the greatest lecturers to be able to tell them all about it. We have students from 100 countries around the world who have been learning with us for 9 years across multiple different disciplinary areas. We can tell you how nurse unit managers learn entirely differently to aspiring fintech students. The time of day they learn, the amount of content they need in order to be able to feel confident in something, the amount of support they need from an instructor or a facilitator, and what that support is and what that type of feedback is they're looking for, and how that will then feed into them being able to engage and network with other students, which then leads into group work and problem solving and group things. So we have all of these data and insights, and I think universities in a lot of ways have these data and insights too. And I think back to when we first met, Dan, and it was around utilizing the mountains of data and insights and pieces of information that universities have, and helping them be able to do something with it much easier. I think that's the starting point is, well, who are our audience and how are they learning? And, what do our professions need and want? And how do we create something for them that aligns better to that than the sort of historic assumption we may have had?
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thanks for that, Ron. I'd like to take us in a different direction and focus back on Keypath for a couple of minutes, but actually more on your employees. And as I followed your success over the years, I've been incredibly impressed by the diversity programs and initiatives that you have for your staff at Keypath. And obviously that flows down from the top, but you have wonderful people around you. Can you share with us how that evolved and developed over time, and what can other companies learn and strive to achieve your successes? And then part two of that is do you see that flowing across in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion for your university partners and their programs, and respecting the diversity that you mentioned of the learners?
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for. It's always reassuring to hear when people pick up on that. I have the fortune of meeting every new person that comes into the company, irrespective of where they are and what they're doing. I spend some time with them 2 to 3 weeks after they've come in, rather than scaring the life out of them on day one. And
you don't make them clean the toilets, I hope.
Oh, don't make them clean the toilets. Yeah. And I don't care how they got their skills. And I could set my clock to it, without fail, they will say, I had no idea it was this welcoming, this diverse, and this supportive from the outside. I had no clue. And there's a lesson for us there in how we communicate what the hell we do and who we are and what we embrace and what's different about us. But it doesn't matter where people come from, what their background is, they will say that without fail. So it's nice when it gets recognized externally. So I appreciate that. Our emphasis on equality and culture and diversity is by far the greatest asset we have as a business. It absolutely feeds into the work we do, the partnerships we get to have, the top and bottom line performance that we have as a business. It is all directly correlated to the culture that we have and the people we get to hire and the environment they get to work in. It is a straight path between them. And I think of all the things that we are proud of and we've got right over time, the culture that we've been able to build here is so far ahead of anything else that we've been able to do. And it's certainly the thing I'm most proud of. We were intentional about it from the start. So I always find it quite difficult to talk about, well, what have you done and what's evolved and what have you got right? It's kind of been in our DNA from the start that certain principles that we align to, and the same as most companies do, but we were ruthless about them, about embracing diversity, about hiring youth and young people. We really did do that. We certainly chose inexperience in a lot of ways because we were looking for aptitude and determination and skills and the opportunity for risk taking. And I think people often overlook this, but we've done a lot of stuff and made tons of mistakes and done some stupid things over time. But we've kind of been always okay with that, and we've told people that's all right, give it a go. And one thing I've learned for people from various cultures and backgrounds, that ability to fail and not be judged and treated differently or held accountable, but in a lessons learned way as opposed to a stick. That's really helped build culture. So we've won awards, and I think it's close to 60% of people that work here weren't born in this country. We're 70% female and all these types of things. And yeah, they're statistics, but they drive the culture that we've got. And I think I don't know if that's any different. I haven't worked anywhere else for 9 years, so I don't know if that's any different anywhere else. But I think the thing that helps drive it is none of those things are any different to how most companies operate. But the thing that really drives it is that every so often you get tested, something happens, and you have to take a position or a stance, and that can be an internal issue or matter or discussion or problem you got to solve, or it can be something external. And we were really intentional and focused around the external things that we felt mattered. There's a lot of external stuff happens all the time, right? But the stuff that had a direct impact or a correlation to what we did. And I think back to, we're really early supporters of marriage equality, and we made a real big stance with Black Lives Matter, and we ran some things whenever the mosque attack happened in New Zealand, and even little things around how we handled COVID, given how our people came from various different backgrounds and the sort of anxiety and fear and family issues that they had with that. Those things, those tests along the way reinforce the culture. And I've used this example before, but I send emails out every so often around, hey, we've achieved X things, or we've signed a new university, or we've grown to Y numbers. No one really cares. But if I go back to whatever 4 or 5 years ago when we took a real stance around whatever it was, Black Lives Matter, the feedback I got on that is greater than anything we've ever done around a university partnership and so on. So integrity matters in these things, and sometimes you've got to manage the test that comes your way, because that enforces culture more than anything.
Well said. Well said. Look, there's so much more that I'd love to dive in there, but I'm also aware, you've given us a lot of your time already. So two remaining questions. One, I always come back to this over time, that I remember from a couple of years ago. I don't know what event or conference it was, but you were asked for your advice for universities, and it was to stop doing piloting all these different systems, and to make a decision and go all in on an initiative. And that was obviously from a vendor perspective, that's wonderful, music to my ears. But then COVID happened, right? So that devastated the institutional finances, in terms of the teams and institutional capability to actually deliver on initiatives. So does that advice still hold true?
I fully believe that. Like most good things I've learned in life, someone else did it and said it, and I was fortunate to be at Arizona State University in ASU Online in the really early days of their development, before they became this behemoth that does everything, and they probably run pilots and trials now. But I remember spending time, this might have been 15 years ago, with at ASU Online, and Phil Regier, who was, I think he still is, the dean of ASU Online. He said that line: "Don't pilot anything." And I was amazed that a dean of at a university said it. And I think we were with a group of people, and well, what do you mean? He said, well, no one takes pilots seriously. Whether it's an internal pilot or you're piloting a vendor or a partner or something like that, no one takes them seriously because they're allowed to fail. And you don't put the right accountability and leadership around them, and they have a short lifespan, and the measurements of success are all wrong. He said, so either don't do it or go all in. And I love that. And we've kind of kept that mantra here a lot. And it's frustrating because we think we're fast paced and we think we do as much as we can, but there's still so many things you sort of see sitting on the shelf. Like, oh, I'd love to give that a go. But the things that we failed at over time are the stuff that we didn't go all in on. And we maybe didn't put enough leadership support or investment or, structure or governance around them, or give it enough time, or go harder at it. And the things that we have done right are where we've done, obviously, the absolute opposite. So when we get it right, it's where we put absolutely the right people towards it. And when we give it the time to be successful, learn the lessons and go along the way. So it's an easy thing to say, don't pilot anything. We turn down, universities asking, well, can we pilot doing something? We never say yes, because who's going to win out of it?
Yes.
That's our mantra. Don't pilot anything. Go at it or don't do it.
Nice. Go big or go home. Excellent. And the last question before I let you go home, or obviously back to work, is around the future. And we both have youngish kids around the same age. And for me, thinking over the next decade, the changes that I'd love to see in higher education, and so yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, and then what role you think Keypath can and is playing in fostering some of those changes.
Yeah, well, it's still school holidays here, Dan, and I'm just figuring like how long do school holidays last? Because I've run out of things to do, and every day is a high expectation day. Like, what are we doing today? So I'm kind of looking forward to them getting back to just school. Never mind.
That's step one. Okay,
that's step one. Never mind a university in 10 years' time, whatever it is. I think university or universities or whatever formal learning that our kids are going to get in 10 years' time will look materially different to how they look today. I think a lot of it will come back to that earlier point we were talking about the need for a real digital strategy and focusing on that. I would like to think that, and there's so many answers I can give here, but I'll summarize it in one. I would like to think that by the time my children get to, let's say, university age in their life, that wherever it is they're going knows a hell of a lot more about them than they do students walking in there right now. Now, it's up to my children to be able to sort of chart a path for themselves, to learn and to apply the skills and to work hard and do all those types of things and fit into whatever environment, virtual or physical, that the university has on offer. But I don't think it's unkind to say that our higher education institutions need to know so much more about who they are when they walk in, whatever that's a virtual or physical door, and be better prepared to cater for who they are and how they learn and when they want to learn and why they want to learn. And it's on their terms, more so than this sort of binary offering we give currently through higher education. And there's no excuse for that not being the case. We have just too much data and too many insights and too many systems, and there's a lot to do to link up, schooling and learning right through life. But I can't see why we can't get better at that faster, and we can't know more about students. And then, there's a component of self-driven learning that is always on the learner that they've got to apply themselves. But the onus is on the system and groups like us and you and everyone else in there to be able to take everything else away, so that when they get there, we have the right form of learning for them that's catered to, my daughter, your kids, whoever it is.
Great answer, and great vision, and we better get busy and partnering with educational institutions of all shapes and sizes, and to help make that a reality, that future vision a reality.
It's exciting now.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Ryan, for your time. Really enjoyed the discussion. So many wonderful thoughts. Thanks again. It was really great discussion.
Yeah, true, Dan. Thanks for the opportunity and lovely artwork.
Thank you. Likewise. All right. Thanks, Ryan.
Sure. Bye.